Hello, everyone. Welcome to this podcast called Dr. What, where we talk to real scientists from London and all over the world, asking questions from real people in London and all over the world. And it's going to be an interesting podcast. And I can't wait for you to just tune in and listen or watch it on YouTube. So we're going to dive into it. I have two wonderful guests with me today. Um, and I will let them introduce themselves. Welcome. I would like to know your name, please. What kind of doctor are you?
Hi, Josh. I'm very pleased to be here. So, my name is Dr. Lindsay Ann Edwards. I work at Guy's Hospital and I'm a microbiologist and mucosal immunologist.
Mm.
So, big words, but I look at bugs and us as the host and how those two things interact, how those things go wrong, and how that can lead us to either chronic inflammatory diseases or infections, and something that we'll unpack a bit later, but antimicrobial resistance.
Antimicrobial resistance. That's a very big word.
It is,
And
yeah.
I watched a musical yesterday, and that really, really got to my heart. So we'll talk more about that. And then the second doctor we have in the room today.
Well, hello, my name is Dr. Aaron LeBlanc. As you might guess from my accent, I'm not from anywhere around here. I'm actually a Canadian paleontologist and a lecturer in dental biosciences at King's College London. And I'm also sticking out like a sore thumb from a research side as well. I'm a paleontologist by training, studying things like dinosaurs and other extinct animals in a faculty of dentistry. So that might not sound immediately clinically
Yeah.
relevant, but maybe as we dive into it, I'll spin it in such a way that you might believe me that it is
Wow.
clinically relevant.
That's interesting. I
Super
would
cool.
like to know. Yeah, yeah,
Super cool.
yeah. Thank you so much, guys, for being in this podcast. Thank you so much for making time of your very busy schedules. I know you guys are so busy. So let's go back to the past. The 10-year-old you. When did you want to do this wonderful life of being a doctor? Yeah, Lindsay.
So I could start with this. I actually had this was a wish of mine from a very young age. So I ended up, I don't know why, but I ended up going with my parents to a talk from some missionaries from a leprosy colony, and they were showing. So I think I was about 4 or 5 years old, and they were showing these patients how much that they were suffering and things like this. And apparently, I turned round to my mum and dad and said, "When I'm older, I want to do something to help those people," and that just never left me. And I naturally happened to be good at science. I did toy with it to do medicine or to do the fundamental research that I do. And for me, I really was passionate about the science and had a inquiring mind. So I wanted to understand how things work. So for me, it just naturally more fit to going into the research side. But I do a lot of clinical translational work now anyway. So
Yeah,
I kind of get the best of both worlds, if you like.
that's amazing. Wow, gosh,
Yeah.
Aaron.
When I was 10, I think it's safe to say I just haven't grown up since I was about 4.
That's good.
So most paleontologists in academia, they will tell you the same story. So I grew up with a childhood fascination with dinosaurs. I grew up in Western Canada, really in the best place in the country to enrich that interest you might have in the ancient world, because we have lots and lots of fossils of different ages, of different kinds of animals and plants from different spots in my home province of Alberta. And so I just would go fishing with family members and dig around on the sides of riverbanks or lake shores, and occasionally find a fossil, and that would only fuel that passion for all things extinct, especially dinosaurs. But if you asked me when I was younger, would I end up doing something that has a bit of a clinical spin to it in some way? Would I go into a faculty of dentistry as a researcher? I definitely did not see that. I thought I would be a character from Jurassic Park, going out and digging big ditches and digging up old skeletons, and that would be my job every day. So that definitely was a change later in life, to understand that that's not actually the whole job of being a professional scientist.
Oh wow, that's
Yeah.
amazing. Yeah, I'm just gonna stay at you again now. So,
Sure.
what is the big question that you're trying to solve now?
Well, now that I'm a principal investigator with my own students in my own lab, we do have some longer term questions that we're interested in. I, over a long time in my young research career as a graduate student, also as an undergraduate student, I was sort of finding where I would fit in this field of paleontology, and I naturally became fascinated with teeth. And that's really what eventually brought me over to dentistry. But at its core, my lab has two main questions. The first is, how have teeth remained the same fundamentally from a developmental perspective, from a tissue perspective, the parts of the teeth? How have they fundamentally remained the same over the last 400 plus million years of the history of
Mm,
teeth? And also how have they changed over that time to suit different diets and different functions in different animals, to give us context of why our teeth look the way they do and behave the way they do in health and disease. The other side, which I'll probably get into a bit later, is enamel, the hard white part of our teeth that we brush every day. That part that doesn't grow back and why we need dentists really fascinates me, because different animals have evolved different strategies to cope with the stresses of their feeding. And we can see that reflected in their
mm,
enamel.
that's amazing. Dr.
That's
Lindsay?
cool. Um, so for me, I'm tackling this thing called antimicrobial resistance, which is a bit of a mouthful. And essentially, what it is it's where antibiotics and things that we're using to treat infections, those microbes have evolved to basically not be susceptible to those drugs. So they carry on growing and can cause disease and death, essentially. And really, we're trying to unpick something that's quite complicated because essentially, I don't know if you know, but it's a really microbial world. So there are more organisms, microbes, if you like, on this planet than there are stars in the universe, and there's over 100 billion stars. So we're interacting with these microbes every single day, and those most of those interact on our mucosal surfaces, so on our skin where we interact with things. And we're trying to understand those interactions to try and sort of reset where things might have gone wrong, and you get the development of this, what's called antimicrobial resistance. Um, so it's quite complex because we're trying to look at this evolution over hundreds of thousands of years
Mm,
of our interactions with these microbes, and then trying to reset it in a way that's can promote health rather than what we've got at the moment, which is we're living in a lifestyle where we're promoting disease essentially.
mm,
Um, so yeah, it's uh, so we're looking at alternative ways for antibiotics, if you like. So they're an amazing thing, antibiotics. So they get a lot of bad press. It's not that they're bad. They're a really modern marvel of, the medicine that we have today is possible because of the antibiotics that we have. But unfortunately, as humans, we've misused them quite a lot, and then we've driven something called antimicrobial resistance in a direction that's making us more susceptible to infections and disease and death, sadly.
wow, that's amazing. That's incredible research there. I just love the theme going around between these fields about evolution, how the bacteria is evolving, the teeth is evolving, the species are evolving as humans and as animals. Um, so let's talk about the future now, going forward. Where do you see your research or your field, Dr. Aaron? Where do you see this all going?
Uh, Paleontology or just my research in general?
Both.
Okay, all right. So paleontology is in a funny place at the moment. So we classically would go out in the field and dig up fossils and describe them in the scientific literature, the shapes of the bones and numbers of teeth, let's say. And we try to understand how different groups of animals could be classified together, how they've evolved, how they've moved about planet Earth as the continents have shifted and oceans have sprung up between different parts of the continent and split them up. So I've been really interested in the evolutionary history of different types of plants and animals and fungi even. Um, but I think now the field is trying to, I wouldn't say catch up, but it's trying to fit in with the evolution of a lot of different scientific disciplines. So we're constantly using fancier techniques, computational techniques to analyze different models of evolution, let's say. And then the big one right now is CT scanning. So it's giving us
Mhm.
access non-destructively. We don't have to break open a fossil. We can look inside. We can see details that we couldn't see before. And that's allowing us to learn more and more about the anatomy and the evolutionary history of different types of things. And then from my side as well, looking at the chemistry, using different elemental analyses to understand the chemistry of teeth and bones, how that might have changed over tens or hundreds of millions of years, but also trying to rewind the clock a little bit and see maybe what the chemistry of the teeth, for example, looked like when the animals were alive. Um, and in terms of my research, it's going to keep evolving, to use the word for today, I guess. It's going to keep changing and keeping pace with the techniques that we're gathering in the lab. So my students and myself are always learning new techniques to help us unlock different details of fossils, and then also compare them to a lot of modern animals that serve as good models
Yeah,
to compare them.
it's amazing. Mm.
So it actually, it's a very similar story for myself, that essentially technological advancements that we're having now are helping us to go back and look at what was going on in the past. So we're looking at these host microbial interactions using high sequencing techniques that weren't available, and that's helping us to understand how all of these interactions between us and these microbes are going on. And in an interesting twist, we're now starting to realise that actually going back to look into the past is really important. So there are lots of species that over industrialisation, moving from hunter gatherer to agriculture, and then use of antibiotics and things like this has actually dramatically changed the microbes that we're colonised with, and we've lost some species over that course of time. But we're able to go back and look in things like Otzi the Iceman, which is a mummy, and you can look at the microbiome in those mummies and other samples, and you can go back and look and see what was the microbiome, what have we lost, and what can we replace, and can we maybe use that as alternatives to antibiotics and things like this. So yeah, we're developing new techniques all the time. We're running clinical trials where we modulate the microbiome to have a look to see if those host microbial interactions, but very much with a window of going back to look in time to what's happened of the evolution of that over time.
Yeah, lovely. I love the journey so far. It's amazing. I'm excited about the next 10 years. Yeah, so the next bit now, I mean, with this journey, you're all both superheroes in your different universes. So we both need sidekicks. So who are your biggest sidekicks? It could be the biggest collaborations scientifically. We could start with that. It could even be something personal, family, friends, colleagues. So yeah, I would like to know your biggest sidekicks. It could be the etal on a paper.
It's a lot of hotels. Do you want me to go
Yeah,
first?
yes, please.
Okay,
All right.
so biggest sidekicks. See, I mean, a lot of my mentors growing up academically during grad school and my postdoc, they're key to my success. I always told people it takes a village to raise a grad student, and it does. So there's technicians, there's your supervisors, there's your lab mates, and then also colleagues from other labs that help support you in your journey. But I would say sidekick, the biggest one for me, definitely my wife. We met during early days in my PhD, and that was really helpful because she was also doing her PhD at the time, just the floor above me. So we could have lunch together every day and commiserate or celebrate different things that we were doing, going through the stresses and trials and tribulations of research together. And then also she's given me a lot of advice over the years that's helped guide sort of my outlook on my career. And also making the big career choices, moving across the Atlantic to London. It was not a choice I made by myself to further career. It was a risk, it was a gamble, and it was good I had someone to to make that risk and gamble with together.
It's amazing. Wow.
It would be the same for me as well. Family is a huge thing. So I've got two sisters, who one is a dentist that trained at Guy's actually and is now working um, in Denmark Hill, and then I have another sister who's a GP, and then obviously my mum and dad. So really, um, they and I also have two nephews. Um, they really help to sort of keep you grounded, I think, and boost you and support you. This career is in a sense it's a vocation, so it's not something that you do in like a 9 to 5 way. You do end up devoting your whole life really to doing this. And so you need the support of friends and family to do that, I think. It can sometimes be all consuming and exhausting in a good way, but can also take its toll on you. So you need support, I think, to be able to do it and to keep you going when your grant does get rejected or
Yeah.
your paper gets rejected for so to remind you that this isn't all consuming, that there is a life outside of what you're doing, and pick yourself up, dust yourself off
Yeah.
and carry on, and then look at feedback and things like you've got from grants in a constructive way to say, okay, I thought that was clear to me, maybe it's not. What do I do next? And these sorts of things. Whereas, you know, everybody's human. It's natural to be, look at these things and go, oh no, I worked so hard on that. These sorts of things. So yeah, it's good. I interestingly, as an aside, a few years back, we interviewed a few members from the Fortune 100 who were all CEOs of successful companies, and they were saying for them to be successful, they needed a support network, but they also needed a hobby outside of what they were doing to remind them that why you're doing things, remind you that there's a life outside and of the field that you're in
Yeah.
to keep you sustain you, I think, to give you the energy to keep going with what you're doing, keep your passion alive and this sort of thing. So yeah. And then of course, obviously, in all of these things, we've got, mentors or staff that you've worked with or people that you collaborate with. And certainly in the work that I'm doing, it's very transdisciplinary. It has to be, it naturally needs to be like that. So you need to have lots of good collaborators and people that you can work with. And I've been fortunate to come across quite a few, really lovely and special people. So
Right. Yeah, the key word I was going to go to next was collaborations because they're quite important um, in research. And let's talk about your biggest collaborations scientifically now. You can it could be the paper. I'm quite interested in knowing the ones that are not ordinary. Maybe you're a scientist and you collaborated with a dancer. Some unexpected collaborations in research.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, I can give you a good one.
Good for it.
I came here on what's called a Mary Curie Fellowship in October 2020. I do not recommend moving across the Atlantic during a global pandemic.
No.
It was
must have
very
been
difficult.
tough. Yeah, very tough. Yeah.
Huge help from the PI on that, Owen Addison, who's now the head of our center in the Faculty of Dentistry. He's been amazing and really supportive. And one of the things we realized when I got here was, we were facing another lockdown. And the whole premise of what I planned to do over the 2 years that I was originally hired to come over here was to run around Europe, gathering fossil material and modern animal material of different teeth, of different shapes and sizes, and comparing to try and understand something about the function of that special tissue, the dental enamel, the hardest part of our bodies, the hardest part of any tooth, how that changes chemically and structurally across different animal species to cope with different diets. That plan went out the window as soon as COVID happened. And because all the museums were closed for obvious reasons. And I remember we sat down distanced, of course, at a long table. And we tried to think about, well, how do we salvage this? Because at the time, the Marie Curie fellowships were not extending the contracts. So you have 2 years and you don't know how long your entire plan is on hold. And we cold emailed, we needed teeth for different types of animals. And I thought, you know what? Um, I think we can get some of these things done from zoos, because the zoos, the animals still need feeding, they still need care. And I wanted specifically things like crocodile and alligator teeth, because they're really, really good for studying and comparing them to different types of extinct animals, including other extinct alligators and crocs, or even dinosaurs. And so we cold emailed, turns out, England's only crocodile zoo. It's called Crocs of the World near Oxford. Very cool zoo if you want to go check it out. I've been there a few times. And I said, I know just from the biology of these animals that they're shedding their teeth all the time. They make new teeth all the time. They lose them in their enclosures. And I said, any chance you keep these after you when you clean the enclosures, keep all the shed teeth? And they said, oh yeah, we've got bags of them from all these different species. I said, can we please have you ship some of those for us to study? And they said, yeah, sure, no problem. And all of a sudden, the inbox in our departmental sort of mail area, all of a sudden these bags show up from the Crocodiles of the World Zoo. People do a double take and I say, these for you. And that my reputation started there, having the weirdest. And then zoos ended up becoming integral to what we do. The biggest one after that was actually the London Zoo. We started studying Komodo dragon teeth because they're shaped exactly like those of many meat-eating dinosaurs. And so they're a paleontologist's best friend for understanding structure and function of teeth that are very similar to those of those kinds of extinct animals. And through connections, mutual connections that I had, I got a call one day on my way into the office, and they said, "Where are you?" And I said, I'm on my way into the office." And they said, okay, you have about 10 minutes to call the London Zoo. Here's this number. Unfortunately, one of their Komodo dragons has been put down. It was ill. It wasn't going to recover, and they needed to put it down. And as a standard practice, they do a post-mortem dissection. They teach veterinary students comparative anatomy that way and best dissection practices. And they said, if you call them, they might be able to hold on to the teeth of this Komodo dragon for you. I said, what are the odds of that? So I ran upstairs and called them, and they sure enough let us examine the jaws and teeth of their beloved Komodo dragon Gannis. And I had to go retrieve him from the zoo, and it was a very unusual but very cool experience to do that.
Oh, wow,
Yeah.
that's very cool.
Mhm.
I'm gonna go to the zoo now.
Highly recommend. London Zoo and Crocs of the World are both
Yeah.
incredible zoos.
Definitely gonna go.
Oxford
Yeah.
Circus, everyone. Disney.
So I've worked with quite a few different creatives over the years because it's quite difficult to get across the concept of antimicrobial resistance. It's not an easy thing to understand. So the field has been trying to work with different people to make that accessible. So I think one of the really joyful things of the work that I do is that we've worked a lot with patient focus groups and things like this and the general public. Because in some of these things, we're going to need behaviour change of the public if we're going to make a difference with some of this. So we want to get the public to be involved. So we're trying to do science with society, not for society, if you like. So we've done some things where we ran some patient focus groups, which was with the British Liver Trust, with some liver patients looking, teaching them about antimicrobial resistance and what it is. But also I do a thing which is called fecal microbiota transplantation. So we run clinical trials with that, and it's literally where you're taking the poop from somebody that's healthy and transplanting that into somebody that's diseased. So in this case, liver patients, and obviously that's a bit icky, isn't it? And a bit of a tricky topic, so we want to make it a bit more socially acceptable. So we did some focus groups with the patients to see how they would feel about having this treatment. And we had some creative people. So I can name Caitlin and Misha is a wonderful team that worked with us, and they helped us to run some workshops and facilitate that using cartoons and games and things like this to make it a bit more accessible to understand. They then turned that into an animation, and they also made a soundtrack to that animation, which is Microbiome, where these organisms make their home is the name of it. So it's quite catchy, which is good. And we had a meeting at the Houses of Parliament to tell parliamentarians about our research, and we got to play the animation and the theme tune there, and that was really helpful to help people understand what we were trying to do, and like a call to action essentially. But there have been other opportunities, like recently we went to a play, Lifeline, which is
Yeah.
on at the Southwark Playhouse in Elephant and Castle for the next few weeks. I'd highly recommend going. So this is a theatre production explaining about Alexander Fleming and the discovery of antibiotics, and about antimicrobial resistance. So that's quite exciting. And we've got some other bits and pieces that are coming up in the future. So some films and things like this around antimicrobial resistance to try to explain what it is, what antibiotics are. So, what we don't want is people to think that antibiotics also is a bad thing. So we've got this development of this antimicrobial resistance, but antibiotics are a great thing. So we have a difficult job in communicating this, that we don't want people to go away and then think, oh, I shouldn't take my antibiotics if they've been prescribed for you. We do, if you clinically need them, then you do need to take them, and please do complete the course if you do get prescribed them. So they're a wonderful thing. So we don't want to say you shouldn't take those, but we also need to understand that we take them responsibly, which is something that as humans, sadly, we haven't been doing. So
Yeah. Amazing. Thank you guys so much. We're gonna go to so I asked a bunch of people on the tube, in the train, people you wouldn't know, that wouldn't know a thing about your field of research, different questions based on just reading your bios, and I've got a few of these questions just to ask you, and I just need some of your replies in them, and some of these questions, and we'll start with Aaron. So Oh,
I can tell this is where this is going already. How many times on the tube did they just run away from
it was just I just asked random on my way home. Do you have any questions for? Yeah. So can I grow my teeth to become like a snake in a few years' time?
Can I? Oh, okay. So this is a
Yeah.
question about, can you regrow your teeth in a few years' time? It's
Yeah.
actually a really good question, because I always tell people, we do a lot of outreach programs as well, especially with year 6 and year 8 kids, teaching them tooth anatomy and basics of dentistry and why we need dentistry. But we don't do it with human teeth. We do it with dinosaur teeth and snake teeth, Komodo dragon teeth now. And one of the things we always teach them, and even adults are shocked by this, is that we as mammals are freaks in that we've lost the ability to continuously make new teeth. All mammals, almost all mammals, there's a couple weird exceptions, are like that. Your dog, your cat cannot regrow teeth after their adult ones pop into their mouths. Um, and so there's huge amounts of research trying to figure out either how to switch that gene back on that allows teeth to continuously regenerate, or find another workaround to allow us to grow teeth. I don't know, what would the term be? Ex vivo, outside of the human mouth,
Yeah.
and then transplant them back into the mouth. Um, there was some promising research early on. I personally struggle with the idea that we'll be able to ever do that for many reasons. Um, one of which is the time it takes to make a human tooth. A snake, a Komodo dragon, can make a new tooth within a month. No problem.
wow.
They can do it extremely rapidly. Humans have evolved as mammals over 200 plus million years to develop their teeth very slowly, for the most part, especially in larger animals. It takes up to 3 years for our molars, the enamel on our molars, to fully mature. So if a lot of my dentistry colleagues will always say, well, in the future, how much better is that than, say, an implant to replace, or dentures to replace lost teeth? Can you convince a patient that, you know what, I'm going to stick you with this needle. It's got a developing tooth in it. It's going to form a new tooth. It's going to grow naturally. We hope there might be some issues there, and we hope it'll erupt in exactly the right spot. We might need to correct that when it comes out. It's going to take about 3 years, or it's going to, maybe we could accelerate it. It's going to take a year. Or I can give you an implant. In a couple of appointments, we'll have everything sorted for you. It's about 80% as effective. And so that's, I think, a question we should tackle. I'm going to butcher the Jurassic Park quote, but we were so preoccupied with whether or not we could, we didn't stop to ask whether or not we should. And I think that's
Yeah,
the key to that.
it's amazing. Thank you. Yeah, so thank you guys. So make sure you keep, if I see you on the tube, please ask questions. Give me questions for these amazing scientists. So Lindsay, so I've got one for you. Antimicrobial resistance. Wow. Um, are bacteria going to rule the world and take over all of us like they do in the alien movies?
Essentially, they already are ruling the world. So they're the most dominant thing that we have on this planet. So if you look at bacteriophages, which is like a virus that infects bacteria, that's the most dominant entity on this planet. So we're interacting with all of these things on a daily basis, and we're now starting to understand that these microbes can actually control a lot of our functions. So we rely a lot genetically on the genetic material that they carry and the functions that they do, and it can, in some things, even control potentially the way your mood, how you feel about things, as well as your physical health and well-being. I don't know whether we're quite at the Last of Us movie series
Yeah.
of it, fungus taking over and turning us all into zombies. But certainly, these microbes have a dramatic effect on our metabolism, our immunity, our health, our well-being, and even how we feel. So I think they are having a significant effect already on us. So yeah.
That's amazing. I think I'll still stay on you again. So um sorry to the audience. When I go to the toilet, should I touch anything? Because I think that there's so much germs in the toilet I don't even want to touch anything.
Well, it's true. Obviously, your stool contains a huge amount of microbial content, and in the fecal microbiota transplantation that we're doing, that's what we're doing, is we're taking somebody's poop and we're transplanting it. We obviously filter it. We remove any pathogens, and we test for all of those things. So please do not do that at home. Um, you can well, maybe I shouldn't say, but there are people that are attempting to do this at home, but you shouldn't, because obviously it needs to be done in a healthy, like an environment where everything is screened and in a clinical environment. But I think the thing is, obviously, is to have good hygiene helps. So I mean, wash your hands after you go to the loo. Make sure you do wash your hands. And we've learnt in COVID that you need to do that, and you need to sing, the length of songs, so it's a decent amount of time. And obviously you need to be careful around hygiene.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's amazing. Aaron, so can you grow a dragon or a snake again? I don't know why obsession with snakes. If you found a tooth cell.
Oh, that's a fun one. So that's about cloning, I guess. I mean, I guess it's possible. I mean, that's not really my realm of expertise, but I mean, you would So there's a lot of, I guess one way to answer that, there's a lot of sources, for example, stem cells
Yeah.
inside teeth. And we see that more and more. There's more what are called stem cell niches. So spots where you have these cells that essentially could be programmed to turn into virtually any other type of cell. Teeth have a lot of those. Especially, I imagine reptiles probably have a lot because they're continuously growing new teeth generations all the time. So a good example, my good friend, the Komodo dragon. For every tooth you see sticking out of the mouth in a Komodo dragon, there are 4 generations of new teeth growing
Wow.
underneath the gums
Wow.
for that tooth.
Wow.
So they're little tooth factories. So that there's going to be sources of cells there that could be useful for that type of thing in the future. I'd be the worst person to do that because I, of course, study the hard tissues oftentimes. I do get into development quite a bit now. But for example, if it were a fossil tooth, I wouldn't be able to tell you how to do that. Yeah.
That's amazing. Still on you. With the Komodo dragons, why are they called dragons and not Komodo snakes or Komodo alligators?
Ooh, I like that. Why do we call them Komodo dragons? I think that comes back to the mythos, the mythology around them. Probably from the locals that um, uh, live next to these animals. They're found on 4 different islands. I think it's 4 islands in Indonesia. And so I imagine the name could come from that. I mean, these lizards are massive, 3 meters long for some of the big ones. They would happily go after humans if they were hungry enough. So I imagine that plus their appearance, the pretty scary looking to some people. I think they're amazing and beautiful animals. So it could come from that. I would guess. Um, Komodo dragon isn't really a correct term, of course. They're not dragons. Dragons don't exist. I'm sorry to say. I know. I'm sorry. Komodo monitor is sometimes another term people use because they're in the family called the monitor lizards. So that comes up a lot. Another name for them is the aura. Those would be, I guess, probably more accurate than calling them Komodo dragon. But I mean, with a name like that, everyone's fascinated
Yeah.
by them, so it stuck. Yeah.
Thank you. And the last question for Lindsay. Um, so can I grow the good bacteria at home to fight the bad ones?
So we do grow the good bacteria, and that's what we're doing when we're looking at these trials of modulating the microbiome. But please do not do this at home. So we do this in a laboratory setting, and as I was saying before, we test for a whole range of different known pathogens, including now COVID. And we are screening the product to make sure that we know what's there. And what we are trying to do is to boost those beneficial microbes that have lots of functions that we need. So we do live in harmony mostly with these what we call your microbiota or microbiome. So we need a lot of those microbes because they have enzymes that help us to digest our food, but they also help us to make vitamins that we can't make. They help set up our immune system. So people have looked in germ-free mice, which is where you can grow the mice without having any of these microbes, and then we see that your immune system, your intestine doesn't develop properly without having those microbes there. So yeah, we're trying to basically harness those good microbes and boost our own immunity so that we can make basically humans more resilient so that you don't need as many antibiotics because you're boosting your own immunity to fight it off. But all of this is, we need further research. We've got some exciting data, but we need to understand those interactions more. And it definitely, we don't want people to be doing that at home because it comes obviously with a health risk at doing that. But we're hoping that the future is that you would have a treatment that is readily available to everybody, so that everybody could boost their immunity. So that's the future that we're looking to.
It's amazing. Thank you. And we're gonna go to you know the postdocs and the fellows and the students in your department and also all over the world trying to become like you. What would you want to say to them, or what would they want to hear from you? The challenges you think they're going through right now, and what would you want to sort of professional advice?
Are you sure they want to be like me?
uh,
So yeah, I do get that question a lot, especially from young paleontology students and postdocs in my field. Um, it's a bit of a unique field because we're mainly foundational scientists. So we're not usually clinically oriented or translationally oriented. We're curiosity driven. And there is an innate value to that. That's why natural history museums are so popular. We love to learn about our world and the past, present, and future of planet Earth. So it has value, but the problem is in these economic times like 2026 and the last several years, when institutions are cash strapped, one of the first things to go are the natural sciences. And I was fortunate that I had already found a natural interest in taking my research in paleontology and comparative anatomy of living things, and trying consciously to move it to a more dentistry oriented research, which I think we've done fairly well so far. And so what I tell my colleagues and younger students sort of coming through the pipeline is be creative with your research. Odds of you getting hired as a paleontologist, as a pure paleontologist, have dropped significantly, and that's a sad thing. But that doesn't mean it's hopeless. It means you have to be creative in how you plan your career trajectory. And sometimes it's a matter of taking that research, the paleontology background you have, and tailoring it to another field and becoming interdisciplinary. And that can help you open up a few more doors that maybe you didn't think of. And that's exactly what happened in my case.
That's great. Interdisciplinary, that's very important.
I'd say the same thing. I've realised over my career so far, it's a journey really, and it's not being a researcher. It's not a linear journey. It's more like a winding yellow brick road. I was working as a microbiologist, really looking at fundamental microbiology as at the start of my career. But in around sort of 2010 onwards, the funding for all of that completely disappeared. And there was more of a focus on cancer and heart disease and things like this, because those were the biggest killers at the time. So funding naturally went over to that. So I myself then had to change career. So I think it's important to look at your translational skills that you develop. So and to look at applying yourself to different things. And I've had to change fields a few times over my career, but I've always kept with the same fundamental joy and passion for things, which is which now means I'm working on something that I wanted always to work on. So I think you need to find something that you're passionate about that keeps you going when you do get knocked back on some of these things. So it's a career where you do suffer a lot of rejection a lot. So you put in publications, you put in grants. Everybody in your colleagues can say it's amazing, but the reviewer does not feel the same. So you need to have some sort of resilience to be able to deal with that. And I think part of that resilience is having a passionate about something that you, even when you're being knocked back, you still want to be able to work on it. And then to not be disheartened if you do have to slightly change track a bit, because you're always picking up different skills. So I would say, because of the changes that I've had to make, it's given me a unique skill set that some of my colleagues do not have, which means I'm able to look at things in a slightly unique way to some of my other colleagues. That helps me to bring something to the table and everybody else has their own journey where they're able to bring something to the table. And I think, the way research should be is as a collaborative effort that everybody brings different experiences. It should be transdisciplinary, and people working together. But so I think it's with the global situation, that geopolitics that we have at the moment really does fundamentally affect a lot of what we're doing. So it's going to be a difficult season going forward, I think. So you will need that support network, you will need resilience, you need to find creative ways, as you say, Aaron, of applying your research to something, to be able to get funding and to be able to work on these sorts of things. For me, the geopolitics quite literally drives what I'm doing. So we're seeing things now like in Ukraine, there is pan resistance. So that's where these bacteria are completely resistant to every single antibiotic that we have on the planet. So that means if people get that, they will die because we have no form of treatment. And war, famine, mass migration, climate change, all of these things are actually affecting how we interact with those microbes. So it's a difficult time ahead, but I think if you're passionate about something, it will keep driving you to want to find a way to do it, if you like.
Amazing. Thank you. We're getting towards the end of today's first episode. Thank you guys so much. Quick fire round. Favorite movie?
Oh, Aliens.
Oh, Gattaca.
Ooh, I'm liking where this is going. Favorite artist? Music artist.
Green Day.
Wow.
The Jackson 5.
Okay. Wow, nice. Favorite TV show?
That's a hard one.
Yeah.
That's a really hard one. Recently, I'd probably say The Expanse. I thought it was
Okay.
really good.
Oh, I love movies and I
What about
love
the
the
TV
TV, so
shows?
I can't think of like one
That's
single
hard.
thing. That's a hard one.
Yeah.
There's many
Many good ones.
yeah.
Hobby? Best hobby?
Video games.
Video games. Great.
I like baking cakes.
Best video game?
Of all time?
Yeah.
Well, you are asking hard questions.
Well, it is your best hobby, isn't it?
I would say so. It's got to be Breath of the Wild, Legend of Zelda.
Ooh,
Wow.
wow. You got quick fingers. I'm just gonna say that. Best cake you've ever made.
Well, I've just made one for my nephew, which basically had dry ice, a smoke machine,
What?
it had carnivorous plants, all sorts of things, and dragons. So yeah, so that was quite cool. I don't always get a huge amount of time to do things, but it's for my nephews. It's the one thing where I do like to turn my science into the
Yeah.
cakes that I make, so that they're always exploding in some way or lighting up. And then at Christmas I did one which was to do with like merry-go-rounds and had all kinds of lights and things like this. So
My
yeah.
birthday's coming up.
I'll
Sounds
make
amazing.
you some brownies or
Oh,
something.
there we go.
Nice.
Exploding cake.
Yeah.
Sounds awesome.
Nice. Favorite holiday destination?
Favorite holiday destination. You know what? I'm gonna say Rome. I really like going to Rome. I really, really like it. Walking around and just being immersed in that.
Yeah.
Yeah, Rome is beautiful, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think that's one of the joyful things that we do get to do as scientists. It's the one sort of thing that we bonus, if you like, is that we do get to travel a lot for our research, because part of it is telling people what we found. So I've travelled quite a bit. So it would be hard pressed for me to
Yeah.
name a favourite place. Rome would be one of them though. Yeah.
Great.
That's a tough one.
Posters or oral presentation?
I'm terrible at posters. Oral
Oral
presentation all the way.
Okay. Posters or oral?
I prefer to do an oral presentation, but I have done a tutorial or masterclass about how to make the
Ooh.
most of your
Yeah.
poster. So I think it's always good for the junior sort of researchers out there to think this is a chance to interact with people and get, talk to some people that you might otherwise not have
Yeah.
a good opportunity.
It's a lot more informal. It's a lot
Yeah.
nicer for in-depth
Yeah.
things. My students are way better at posters than I am, though. I'm bad.
It's hard work doing a
Yeah.
poster though, isn't it? Because you're constantly having to
Mm.
talk about
Yep.
it off the cuff. So it's
Yeah.
a skill that you do need to learn to master. Yeah.
Yep.
Well, thank you so much, guys. It's been such a pleasure having both of you. I am Josh, not yet doctor, but just Josh. And today's episode with me has been
Dr.
Dr.
Lindsay Ann
Lindsay, and
Edwards.
Dr. Aaron LeBlanc.
thank you, and keep the questions coming. And I might see you again on the tube, and for the next guest, and I'll ask you questions. Please, please give me your questions, and thank you so much for tuning in. Have a lovely day. Thank you,
Thank
guys, so
you.
much.
Thanks. Thanks, Josh.
Thank you.